Hello, friends. This is your friend Kent C. Dodds, and I'm joined by my friend Henry Zhu. Say hi, Henry.
Hi, everyone.
So Henry and I go way back. I
hmm
remember the first time I remember seeing you on the internet was with Babel ESLint.
hmm
And I don't think I've ever told you this story, but I remember Sebastian was like, "Hey, I can't maintain this project, and like all the others, so I can't do this one anymore."
hmm
And you mentioned I could do it, and I remember seeing um, you, and I was like, this is the first time I've seen this guy. Who is this guy? Like, he thinks he can manage this project, and so
uh-huh.
I went and saw that you'd been involved in JSCS and stuff like that.
Uh-huh.
But I just remember
That's funny.
thinking that. And then, of course, like now you're the head honcho
hmm
maintainer of Babel at this point. But and since then, I've gotten to know you, and it's been a real pleasure. So yeah,
Same.
why don't we just get to know you generally for those who don't know you very well? If you could just tell us a little bit about yourself before we get into our conversation, I'm sure people would love to know more about you.
Yeah, so I'm Henry Zhu. I mean, that's kind of a good intro, honestly. I got involved in open source because of a project called JSCS, which is a JavaScript linter. And it was kind of related to JS Hint, and then we eventually merged it into ESLint, which is why you have never heard of the project at this point.
Yeah.
Um, and so I was like, I was in that conversation with Nicholas and the team to help merge the projects, because you don't see that often in open source. Like, it's always like forking things or whatever. I
Mm.
think people were burnt out and we're doing the same thing, might as well combine forces. And yeah, I think I probably thought the same thing as you. You were saying that, like, who's this random person trying to take over this project? Yeah, I was a random person, and I don't know how I ended up in this position, because that was with Babel ESLint. I eventually like maintained that, and eventually was one of the few people that just happened to be involved in Babel. And then when Sebastian got burnt out and he left, I just was one of the people that had to step up. I mean, not like I had to. It's just I accidentally was in that position, and then I just had to learn all of it. And it's not like I knew how to be a maintainer or anything about compilers. Honestly, like, you just somehow made it work. And I think, looking back, I don't think I would give someone, the access to this now. And now that we know about like LeftPad and event stream, all that stuff, it's a really bad idea. But somehow it worked out, and I guess I'm grateful that I had the opportunity, because I'm not like that much of a great programmer in terms of everyone else that's doing stuff. It just happened to work out. So
Yeah.
um
Well,
and yeah.
I happen to know that you've done quite a bit of coding, and I would say that you're a great programmer. But lots of programming is persistence as well. But you've done some really awesome things. So thanks for that. I'll let you finish your telling us about yourself.
Yeah, I guess just real quick, I maintain Babel right now. As one of the I'm the only person working on it full time. And when I say full time, it doesn't mean I'm like spending all my time doing it. It's just my intention is to spend like I'm calling it my job to work on this project, because I quit my job at Adobe. So I quit like last March. So it's been almost a year and a half now. And I'm fully funded through the community, through Open Collective and Patreon and now GitHub. And yeah, that has been, I guess, a dream come true. I know it's a lot of people's dreams to do open source full time. Probably one of the few people that is able to do it. Um, and so yeah, I've been trying to figure out how to make that work for myself, our team, and then just thinking about open source in general and trying to help other people and other collectives or other projects get funding, or just like not even money related. Like, how do you deal with the emotional side of open source, dealing with just being a maintainer and managing that with your regular work life, all that stuff. And then just more personal stuff. I'm pretty into video games, board games, and ping pong. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. What are your favorite board games right now?
Actually, yeah. So I've been pretty into Seven Wonders, and then lately a lot more. You could call them party games, because not everyone's like super hardcore into board games. So
Mm.
Codenames is really good. Dixit. And recently I got this game called The Mind, which is really great. Um, and I actually wrote my last newsletter just about that game, because I thought it was interesting. So I might come up with a blog post about how I think that relates to like other things. Um, but yeah,
Mm,
it's really cool.
interesting.
It's a
Well,
game where, just to I guess explain it, it's a
mm,
game where you are supposed to technically read people's minds, um, and which is it sounds weird, but essentially it's just a deck of cards from 1 to 100, and you deal out cards to each person, and there's multiple levels. Each level, you like level 1, you have 1 card. Level 2, everyone has 2 cards. But you're supposed to play the cards in order from ascending order, but you can't talk to anyone. So like if you have like the 2 or like the 1, you have to play it right now. But if you have the 10, you should probably play it soon. But you have no idea who's supposed to go. And so you can be kind of lenient with like how you communicate, like body language. But it's really fun because there's scenarios where it's like it just seems impossible that it happened. But like say, I played 19, then someone played 20, and then 21, then 22, and nobody like said anything. It just like happens, right?
huh,
So there's like really cool moments that you can have, and it's not. Sometimes it doesn't even feel like a game. It's just like a way to like bond together in this
uh-huh.
shared experience. Yeah, it's really interesting.
That's fascinating. So it's like a collaborative game. You all win together kind of game.
Yeah, yeah, or
Cool.
lose
Yeah.
together.
Yeah, that's a fun game. That sounds very interesting. You'll have to bring it to the next conference that I
Yeah,
see you at.
yeah. Are you going to React Rally? It's yeah. So
Yeah, yeah. Are you going?
okay. Yeah. So I'll bring it.
Awesome.
I'll bring it then.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, by the time everybody listens to this, that'll already have happened. But
Yeah, that's
I'm
true.
sure we had a great time. But yeah, cool. So I always love talking with you because you have a really unique perspective on the world of open source, being a full time open sourcer person. And recently, you haven't been doing a whole lot of coding with
hmm
the open source work that you've been doing, which is interesting. And as a maintainer, I know that like most of maintaining a project is not coding. Um, but like pretty much not doing any coding recently. I wanted to ask you a little bit about your strategy there. How do you maintain a project or even contribute to a project without actually coding?
Yeah. So that's a really hard question because, and this kind of gets into not even open source. Like, how do I parallel with people that are not maybe contributing now? Is that, when you get to a point where like, oh, maybe I should be a manager, that kind of thing. I think it's the same problem. And I've never been a manager. I've always just been, programmer at a company. I never really thought about getting promoted and all this stuff. And
Mm,
I think that transition is hard because what happens is you go from I think we tend to value our work based on like how many commits or like pushing out features, like shipping things, right?
mm,
And when you become a manager, you're not writing code either, probably not as much at least. And so your evaluation is around like people, how they're doing, like how do you move them up towards the goals that they want. And so I'm basically doing the same thing with our own team. And before, I was like, oh, you feel good about like making commits, fixing bugs, merging PRs, all these things. And now I don't have that anymore. So how do you even measure if you're doing well? And you always feel bad because you always want to go back to writing code because it's like not just easier because you're used to it, but then also easier to measure. And so it's
mm.
been kind of hard. It's like definitely taking this whole year to feel like okay that I don't feel guilty not writing code, basically. Um, Not even because I think I should be writing code, but then other people might think I should be writing code too. Because I think we
Yeah.
all have this expectation that maintainers should be writing code, but then also maintainers know that, not even just the code, but like triage and merging things, releasing, process, onboarding, marketing, documentation, testing, making videos, giving talks. Like there's a million things you can be doing,
Hmm.
and they all help the project. And if our goal is to make it sustainable for a long run, I don't think the way I was thinking about it is like, I don't think long run it would be good if I just spent all my time fixing bugs and making the issue count go to 0 when I know the rate at which it's going to go up and the users that we have is just not possible for one person. So
Mm,
if anything, the way we should be spending money, or the way I should spend my time, is to figure out a way to get more people involved, either new contributors or companies or getting more funding, these other things which take a lot longer time and the feedback
mm.
cycle is a lot longer, but I think it's worth doing. That's what I've been trying to do with like the podcast or giving talks, trying to be more experimental, even like just try new ideas. Like, and you have to be okay with like failing and doing that. And that's hard because There's no like standard or like, oh, I'm supposed to do it this way, and that's kind of scary, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's there's a bit of the unknown, and then that
Mm-hmm.
peer pressure that you mentioned as well,
Mm-hmm.
is tricky, especially, when, people are financing, your decisions. You feel like an accountability toward those
Mm-hmm.
people and making sure that you're doing right by them, which I as a maintainer of projects, I know that, yeah, you can spend a lot of time, like quality time on the project without actually writing, any code. So you mentioned a bunch of things that take up your time as a maintainer of the project that don't involve, writing code. What do you think? Like, let's say that I'm a new person in the open source world. I want to get into contributing open source. I'm probably thinking, like, okay, I need to write some code to, to like that's kind of the default. It's like when people say contribute to open source, they're thinking code. Um, what would you say to somebody who's just starting to get into open source as a good way to kind of enter that realm? Like maybe somebody comes to you and says, "Hey, I think Babel is a cool project. I want to get involved." What are the kinds of things that you say to kind of help them get into the open source?
Yeah. I mean, I think you've talked about this a lot too, but there's no, because the default's code and there's so many things to do, think of it as a company or just a volunteer project. I know there's no blanket statement I could say about what you could do, but I think honestly the best thing to do is just to talk to that person, like, and figure out what they like, what they're good at, what their background is. Like, I would say something like, if you already have a coding background and you're just writing code at work already, then you maybe your first contribution could be code, because you're the open source coding, and that is not that different. It's just that I like to say it's like when you join a company, all the code is unknown to you too, right? You have to get onboarded and learn all this stuff. It's just that you're getting paid for it and someone's supposed to be your mentor. But honestly, it's the same thing with open source. The code base is also unknown. It's just more visible. And
Hmm.
in that sense, it shouldn't be that different. Although it will be harder because you have to find someone to help you. Um, and maybe, I don't know, for some reason at your job, you're more willing to figure out how things work. And it depends on the complexity of the project. Obviously, maybe if you think that this project is really big, then maybe it's better to find a smaller project. Or the big project has smaller scope projects for you to look at. I think otherwise, I would look at some of the skills that you already have that are outside of coding, or maybe you don't even have a coding background at all. Maybe you're in like finance, or you're doing business, or you do art. You know, I think there are other opportunities to make a difference on the website, or all these different ways. Yeah.
Yeah, they're like it's multifaceted. The
Hmm.
things that open source projects need. Um, Yeah, so like, can you tell me? You mentioned like if you're into finance or something like that, then you can contribute to open source, which made me think of my next question of like, why would somebody want to get into open source if they're not going to be contributing code? Like, what do I like? One of the things that I say, to people about like when people ask me, if I could be their mentor or something, is I say, well, I never really had an official technical mentor. I just used open source as my mentor, and then I had like hundreds of people who were like responding to my PRs and stuff like that, and mentoring me, in the open source world, and so that was one of the benefits, that I got by contributing code to open source. What would you say are some of the benefits to contributing, something other than code to open source?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that it's a good way to get involved in like open source as a project, because I mean, like, this is assuming that you want to get involved in the first place. So maybe like, why would you want to do it in the first place? Well, I would say that it's a type of, I don't know, anyone, what do you call it? Like a thing that is, it just, some of the values that at least are shown through the project are different than in the world, where it's like you give it away for
Hmm.
free. People always, I like, it's so funny. Like, even at church, I'll tell people, like, they're like, what do you do? Like, it's really hard to explain what I do now, but I might, if I just say open source, I'll be like, well, I write code and I give away for free or something like that. And they're like, why would you do that? How do you make money? And all these questions come up. But people are
Hmm.
very interested in that because there's not a lot of things like that. Um, and so just because they want to get involved in a community that's bigger, that's, you could say it's used by lots of people, that kind of thing, you're giving back. I think that's a good reason. And if they want to get into tech, I would say like one way of getting involved without having to necessarily say I'm gonna get a degree and all this stuff is to do open source. And that's I guess I'm just saying that like um being involved in the community is a lot more than just making some commits. There's like
Mm,
understanding who's involved, getting to know those people at a personal level, especially when there's so few people. And a lot of them are very available. Not that you're going to bombard them with questions, but like slowly getting involved. It just takes time. You can't just show up and then expect all this stuff to be given to you. But if you're there, people will notice and will talk to you. Like most maintainers are more than willing to get to know people, especially if they're going to stick around, because they're like so few people do in the first place that like anyone that shows up like, wow, we would totally want to help you, right? um,
yeah.
and so yeah, even recently like we've had two contributors or a few contributors that we added as a triage role, which is really nice that GitHub finally added this
Yeah,
permissions
for real.
model. Like yeah, so to explain, normally you can either be like an admin, which lets you do anything, and then there's like commit access, which lets you merge PRs, but there's no access to let you only like say close issues, label issues, those kinds of things. So we're trying to figure out like, oh, that's one way of like slowly letting people get involved without like overburdening them with responsibility or feeling like they don't deserve certain things. Like, so sometimes you might even add people, just give them commit rights really early, but then they don't use it because they don't feel like they're qualified enough. So I think that's like
Mm,
a stepping stone to help them feel more confident about themselves. Like sometimes I'll give people access and then that means like, oh, you can merge things now. And maybe I'll even suggest do it, but then they're scared. And that's normal. Like, cause
mhm,
you've never done it before. You're scared you're going to like make a bug or a release and like all this stuff. I
mhm.
think it's like, how do you help them get to that point? And that's one way of doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. And like as a maintainer, you really want to give them that responsibility because that when somebody has that gift of trust and responsibility given to them, they often will like stand up for or like rise to the challenge
Yeah.
and become more involved. And so it's great that GitHub has added that new more stepping stone, more I don't know, yeah, that role. Um, so yeah, we talked about like contributing by triaging issues, which is a huge help. Like that's so much of maintaining. And then also their support channels. So you have a Slack channel,
hmm
which I'm sure like I haven't been there in a little while, but when I was, there are people posting things on there all the time asking for help, and
hmm
so there's lots of opportunity to get help or to help out and
hmm
lift there. Designing the website or like building the website or making examples for the website, um, and like also doing podcasts and the things that you're doing.
hmm
I feel like there are just so many opportunities that you can contribute, and all of these things are kind of like
hmm
building around the open source
Right.
project. How do these things like how are these things actual contributions? How does this make the project itself better? Because we're not actually contributing to the core code here, so we're not actually making the software itself better. But by contributing to the things around the software, how does that make things better indirectly?
Yeah. So that's a really good question. Um, I think that that's what the aspect of community is all about. That inherently, you have to be able to. The project is going to be broadcasted in certain ways, and so even through all those channels, there are ways to contribute through that way. And so, like, how are people going to know about Babel? How are people going to know how to contribute to Babel? It's going to be through the docs or videos or giving talks or doing podcasts. Why? Like, that's why now I find like, oh, we should do a Babel podcast just because we talk about all these things by ourselves, and like maybe all the conversations we have could just be recorded and it'd be interesting to people because we assume all these things that people would like to know about. And it doesn't even have to be like the compiler. It could be about open source, what it's like, what are the things that we deal with on a day to day, what questions are we asking that we don't understand, like how, like all these questions we just brought up, like how do we get more people involved? How do we get people to stay? How do we find out what's best for the people? How do we onboard them? How do we organize all the different areas of the project? Like, if you have the podcast and the docs and like, people even find it? Is it organized in a way that makes sense? Maybe there are, we could have copy editing, like the way that we write things isn't like, it's like having a linter for your written stuff. So there like blog posts, all those things. Um, making it more cohesive, I think. And also, probably the most important thing in terms of long-term thing is what's the vision of the project, and making sure people actually understand what's this about, where is it going, those kind of things. And those don't even like, you can tweet things, you can write blog posts, but ultimately it's like, it's almost like, yeah, the culture, the ethos of the project, and what are people when they hear about what do they think? Um,
Mm,
is it positive, is it negative, do they understand what the difference is between, like, say, a compiler and a polyfill, like those kinds of things. And I don't think people do. That means they're not doing a good job of showing that.
mhm,
And there are ways of trying to, so I think it is true. You still have to understand a lot about it, but I think, being able to talk at a high level is really important. Um, if anything, me being able to talk to like people at church or just other friends that are not in tech about what Babel is, and they don't know anything about JavaScript and they still kind of get it, is a good thing, and it helps me communicate better with just any developer. Honestly, like, I don't have to say that it's a compiler. I could just say it's a translator, and I can talk about. I mean, the
mm.
name is Babel, like those kinds of things. Maybe it's easier because we work on that, but I think being able to communicate better is really important. Um, yeah.
Yeah, one thing that occurred to me as you were saying some of those things, I've got a couple of things I want to talk about. So one was that when you're like a software engineer and you're writing code, you think that like it's awesome that you can optimize the performance of this one branch of code, and you're going to save, when you're talking about a project like Babel that's used by hundreds of thousands of projects, you're going to save a lot of people. Even if you shave off 500 milliseconds, you're going to save a lot of people a lot of time. That scales very quickly, and so you feel
True.
really good about that, and that's like a huge contribution. um, and it occurs to me that if you can improve the documentation in a way that speeds people up in learning and applying the cool tool, then you also save a lot of people a lot of time. So maybe you give a talk that shows here's how you do this, or you could build another tool around the tool to make it easier to use for a specific use case. There are lots of different things. So in that case, that would be contributing code, but maybe not to the core project. But there are a lot of different things that you can do that do make a substantial impact on the project. And maybe there's not really an easy place in Babel to speed it up even 25 milliseconds, but there are like gaping holes in the documentation or something where you could speed up a lot of people by multiple, factors of 10 over that or something. And so like there are where the needs are is where the contributions are needed, I guess. And I think that's just there's a lot of opportunity out there for people to contribute code or in various other ways.
Yeah, I think it kind of just gets to this issue in my mind of, you know, as a maintainer or any maintainer, we have to do a better job of showing people what's possible. If all we do is talk about code and we show and we reward people for coding, then people are going to be like, oh, I'm going to write code. But
Hmm.
maybe I should be more vocal about the fact that I'm not writing that much. Not that not doing it at all, but I'm not focusing on that, and that's totally fine. There's plenty of things to do. The fact that I can be full time and not do it shows that there's a lot of things that could be done.
Hmm.
Um, and hopefully that is helpful enough to people to say that, oh, I can. I just like, how do we get people to think a little bit differently, change their mindset around contributing to open source, and to say that, we've been talking a lot about like contributing, and I think a lot of it has to do with knowledge. And I've been thinking a lot more about this idea of like process knowledge, like the think that knowledge isn't just a bunch of bits. It's not just the information that's there, but you know the process behind it, like the metadata and all that stuff. might not be in the docs. And maybe we need to write it down. Or there are
Mm.
things that are just not expressible through docs, and you just learn it during the process of being involved in projects. So very easy example is like when you're playing sports, you have like a mentor that just guides you through it, or when you're learning to cook something. Like there are things that you pick up through the process of doing something that you can't take by just reading something. You have to be in the community. You have to be involved. You have to like it, maybe even. And you'll learn a lot more just showing up, and hopefully the other people show up with you, than simply reading a book or something like that.
Yeah, I think that's very true. One thing that so we're kind of coming down on our time. There are two things that I want to make sure to talk about, and one thing that we haven't mentioned that I just wanted to bring up for people is if you're a maintainer of a project and you want to encourage people to give these kinds of contributions. I'm not going to go too deep into this, but I just wanted to mention all contributors. If you go to
Hmm.
allcontributors.org, it's a great place that shows you how you can give that or encourage that kind of contribution, non-code contribution. So definitely take a look at that. Then that's all I'm going to say about it. But I just wanted, I thought I'd be remiss if we didn't at least mention that.
Yep.
The one thing that I definitely wanted to bring up before we run out of time here is you have this podcast called Hope in Source, which is like hope in
Hmm.
source, right? I love that. I think that's great. But it's
Yeah.
talking about faith and its relationship, and maybe not necessarily relationship, but like the correlation, I guess,
Hmm.
between faith and open source. And I'm curious, I want to hear just a little bit about your thoughts around that and how that applies to the kinds of contributions that we're talking about.
Yeah. So I started that podcast to think, because and it wasn't like, oh, I'm someone of faith, so then I'm trying to figure out what's related. It's just like I got involved in open source, and then after a while I was like, whoa, I didn't realize in the end, like, there's a lot of similarities and there's a lot of parallels, I guess is the word. I think just at a fundamental level that open source, a big part of it is about service, about serving other people in the community, giving back, not expecting anything, that kind of thing. And I think that is the kind of ethos that we want in our faith communities, whatever it is. And I think, in my own church, we serve in certain ways. We serve our own church, we serve the city, that kind of thing. And so that's what got me thinking about that. And, even in terms of like funding, they're like asking for donations, fundraising, this idea of membership into something,
Mm,
being committed to something for the long run. The in terms of religious institutions, they've been around for a long time. They have thought about maintaining a lot more than anyone in tech. I think it would be a good idea for us to pay attention to, like, why things stay as they are. And even this idea of tradition, I think now we kind of shy away from tradition, or I think it's bad, but I think it's important for us to
mm,
understand why things are there in the first place.
mm,
I brought this up on other podcasts, but there's a concept called Chesterton's fence, and it talks about this. If there's a fence in front of you, which is talking about tradition or liturgy, that you might just be like, well, there's a fence, I'm just going to get rid of it. But his point was to say that before you get rid of it, probably someone put that fence there for a reason. It wasn't just there, right? It was like some person put it there. And so before you get rid of it, you should understand why they put it there in the first place, and that would make you be able to have a decision around whether you should remove it or not. And it's the same thing if you keep it there. You should probably understand why it was there in the first place too, because what happens is when we get into our rituals and liturgies and traditions, maybe we tend to create new meanings for them, which is not bad, or we forget why they were there in the first place, and then at the end we won't even do it anymore because it was like, what was the point of this again? So I think it's important for us to think about those kinds of things in open source too. Like, we have our own liturgies there too. We have meetups and conferences. They're annual. People meet up there. We have Hacktoberfest. There are different things that are like that in open source, and we think about, like, how are those going well and how are those not going so well, and what we can do to improve on them. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a lot to be learned from religion and faith, communities of faith when
Mm-hmm.
applied to open source. Yeah, I think that's very true. And you don't have to believe in God to participate in open source, but having a a community of people, I just think, yeah, I agree, it's fascinating, the relationship, or the correlation there, the parallels,
Mhm.
between those two. And if anybody wants to dive deeper into the subject, Hope and Source is a great podcast to look into. So, as we wrap things up here, Henry, is there anything else that you wanted to touch on before we conclude here with our call to action and wrap up?
Um, I mean, it's kind of the same stuff. Um, I think that something I've been thinking a lot more about is just, I mean, you talked about non-coding a lot, but I think I've been trying to get into more other fields that are not literally coding but are related. So that this idea of like trying to be more interdisciplinary, like
Hmm.
things that I thought had nothing to do with open source. I mean, like faith is one of them. Like after that, that's kind of like why. And now that I think about it, it makes sense. I decided to make another podcast called Maintainers Anonymous, and the whole point of that podcast is to. At first, it was like interview other open source maintainers, but then later I was like, oh, I should just talk to anyone that what I would consider as a maintainer, which is very broad now. It's like someone
Mm.
that takes care of something for like some common good. And so, like some of the recent episodes, I interviewed someone that works at a museum, someone that works at a library, or you could be a gardener, you could be a parent. Like there's all these different people that have different experiences in their life and different vocabulary, right? All of this stuff. And I think it's important for us to learn from. I want to. So that's why I want to talk to those people. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's great. And yeah, so people just go consume Henry's content, and yeah, it'll all be good. Cool. So, just as our grand takeaway from this conversation, which I have really enjoyed, it's you probably hear my kids in the background; they're screaming out there. Um,
So,
but yeah, so the call to action is, I want people to try to find a way to do one thing to contribute to open source without writing any code. And so, like we talked about a lot of them, write a blog post, or triage some issues, or go to the support channel and answer some people's questions. But if everybody who listens to this podcast did that for any open source project, that would be like a huge amount of work done to make the world a better place. So
mhm.
yeah, that's your homework for this episode. Cool. So, Henry, how can people get in touch with you if they want to?
Yeah. I guess you could go to my website. It's henryzoo.com, but it's ZOO. And then I'm on Twitter too. So left_pad. Yeah.
Nice. I
I
love
know.
that. That's great. Cool. Well, Henry, it's always a pleasure to chat with you. I've enjoyed our conversation. I hope that the people listening enjoyed it as well. And yeah, we'll see you around the internet. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye.